Yes, thank you very much, Leslie.
Okay. So thank you all so much for joining this. I am Leslie Shad, and I lead Natural Habitat Evanston, but I'm also one of the whether they're just a group of us who are sort of politically active on behalf of birds, and that's Bird Friendly Evanston. So I'm also very much involved with them and on the board of Evanston North Shore Bird Club. So thank you so much for allowing me to postpone this. Sorry we did that to you all last week, but I'll just spend about half an hour talking, a little less than that, I hope. And if people have questions, they can put them in the chat, or they can wait to the end and ask me questions. I'm happy to troubleshoot people's windows. So this is Bird Friendly Evanston, and let me start here. Bird Friendly Evanston, by the way, we originated in about 2014 to try to get a bird-friendly ordinance passed. It has actually happened. So we're pretty much high-fiving ourselves on that, but there's still so much to do on retrofitting existing buildings, because the bird-friendly ordinance really only deals with new construction. So I'm going to be quick on this. I mean, I think you all are probably on this call because you know that birds need our help and have declined by about a third since 1970. So I'm having a little trouble advancing. And people, I don't think that you're this group, but we're sometimes asked, why do we care about birds? And I think you all know that birds are help with seed germination and pest control in terms of raptors, and they're an indicator species of pesticides and all of that. But I think that we care because there are fellow species that humans have caused to decline, and because they bring beauty and music to our ecosystem and our community, and they link us to something bigger than ourselves, wild and familiar. These are actual pictures from Northwestern. Up to 1 billion birds in the United States die each year. It's an indiscriminate killer. Healthy birds die at windows. It's just, whatever birds are passing through. Actually, in fall migration is the worst for all these baby, fledglings that are making their first transition. That's when they die, is in the fall. So you get a lot of young birds in the fall making their first migration. Hummingbirds to falcons, all kinds of birds can be affected, and whether they're migrating or resident, but really migration is really what we're worried about. Birds that are passing through, not staying here, not birds who live around these buildings, but birds who are passing through and trying to evade them. So why do birds hit glass? It's reflected sky and greenery. They don't have a concept of glass. It's, it seems to them like an invisible, not even a barrier. Collisions happen all year round and all day long, but at migration is worse because so many birds are passing through. It's more the number of individuals passing through that really influence that. I mentioned fall migration is the worst. Morning is the worst, especially the first through 3 floors, 1 through 3. You can imagine that birds land on the ground or in foliage, and that tends to be in the lower stories. So those are where the greatest really concern is, although birds can hit anywhere along a building. And, a juvenile peregrine falcon who had fledged from the library in Evanston hit the Chase building. It's just sad. I mean, it's these young birds don't know the danger of these buildings. Lights at night also attract birds. I'm going to talk a little bit about that and about clouds. I think I'm being feedback on somebody's microphone. If you don't see dead birds, I mean, one thing is, they're, in fact, just an anecdote, at Northwestern, we sometimes have to race the seagulls because seagulls will see a bird hit and they'll be like 2 seagulls that race for it to try to grab and eat it. So the bird may be stunned, it may not be dead. But birds, when they are killed, they are quickly dragged away by things. I mean, rats, can do that in where it's an urban area, but raccoons will do that, and other birds will do that. Crows and gulls will do that. So, the fact that you don't see a bird hit doesn't mean that there aren't any. And oftentimes if you see one bird hit, it probably means that's a problem window, that there probably are other birds hitting. Generally at Northwestern, this is mentioning at the bottom here, even those that fly off, about half die from injuries or predation. You know, at Northwestern, we normally see a third that are stunned and 2/3 that die. So more are dying at the windows than are being stunned. The typical hazards. So this is sort of to help you all think about your windows. The best thing to do to identify a problem window is to go outside and look at your windows from the outside. And you can see, I think you guys can see my cursor. The trees that are reflective, this is a reflective window, obviously, and a bird may, you know, land at the tree that this is reflecting and then see this other tree and fly to it. I'll actually point out that you can see that there are lines on this. So this is actually a treated window, and these windows are at Searle building in Northwestern, and it is really eliminated. These little lines have really eliminated the bird hits here. We do once in a while find a bird hit, but not very much. So this is another area at Kellogg building in Northwestern that's very reflective. So, you know, because there are trees right across, it seems to be a high hit area. Yes, so windows that reflect, also bird feeders. If windows reflect bird feeders is often an issue. It's primarily the lower 3 floors, and then glass rails. Birds may try to fly through this, so that can also be a problem. Mirrored glass, you know, the mirrored glass is a problem. Mirrored glass is, I mean, the other issue with this is that more and more buildings are using glass as an architectural feature, but also mirrored glass is being used because it tends to be energy efficient. So there's some, you know, creating greater awareness between the trade-offs and what sort of glass is being selected for energy efficiency is really important. Yes, and at Kellogg, about 500 birds the first year hit, and since strikes have decreased 60%, what they've done is to put bird safe glass on the first, it's on the first 2 floors, I think. It goes up to here. There's also a recessed courtyard down there that where a lot of birds fall into. Transparency, so fly through corners, if you have that at your home, oftentimes in porches and things like that, there can be see-through areas. There's tunnels, you know, at 3 Crowns in Evanston, there's a see-through tunnel that has been some issues. You can see this. Yeah. And foliage inside windows. So if you have an area where you're really growing plants, that also can attract birds in that will hit trying to land near the plants. Green roofs. So around, obviously we like green roofs, and I'm not saying we don't want energy efficient buildings either. We obviously do want that. You know, climate change is will be a eliminator of tons of species in addition to birds. But in terms of green roofs, we need the windows treated around them. You know, basically treat a green roof as if it's a ground story foliage, so that it's treated up to 60 feet the way you would if you were at sidewalk level. So treating all these windows if there are green roofs. This is the courtyard I mentioned at Kellogg, where birds can fall in, and it is, you know, it's basically 2 stories to get out. So that's a fairly vertical, you know, effort to fly straight up to get out of these courtyards.
Yeah.
So things like that can be traps for birds. So what is the solution? I mean, the solutions are pretty straightforward. I mentioned this glass has lines on it. This is a film that Northwestern applied after the fact, so it wasn't architectural here. Here's another, just looking out of this walkway, and so these are lines on the building. I'm just showing that it's not impossible to see out. Here are more of the lines on this building as well. Searle, yes, this I mentioned, you know, that we really rarely find birds, so decreased 90%. We do at Northwestern, we Chicago bird collision monitors walk every morning, two circuits around every morning and during bird migration. And the injured birds are sent down to Willowbrook we have a transfer point at Peggy Notebart, and the injured birds are sent to Willowbrook, and the dead birds are cataloged at the Field Museum. So we good statistics on how the buildings, what the worst buildings are, to try to help Northwestern make choices about which buildings to remedy. This is, so many people use decals, putting up hawk decals or leaf decals or things like that. And sometimes birds will actually see the decals and avoid the decals, but they will avoid them by flying right next to them. And so you often see bird collisions right next to them. To actually be effective, you need no gaps greater than 4 by 2 inches. So more or less the size of your fist. Hummingbirds actually will still hit in a smaller gap than that. But this is sort of explaining why. This is a red-breasted nuthatch, sorry. And you can see that they, they can fly between openings. So this is measuring that. So this is a decal. This was at Searle. This did not work at Searle. Birds were still trying to just fly around it. It doesn't, I don't know that they, obviously I'm not in the mind of a bird, but I don't think they necessarily see this as a hawk. I think they see it as a shadow on a window. So they may avoid the shadow, but they're not afraid of it as if it were an actual hawk. I think, anyway, this is a person measuring, a 4 by 2 gap. So trying to keep the stripes, these stripes should be 2 inches apart, basically. And this is a really good video, which I wanted to try to play, but I'm not going to do that because it would disrupt us too much, I'm afraid, here. But the cheapest, easiest way to do, to remedy a window is to get a ceramic pen. Like this is I think this is a Peebo pen, Peebo porcelain paint marker. There are others of those. You don't obviously have to use that, but some kind of ceramic pen. There are other companies that make these, and you basically make you need a yardstick, or you need some to make it neat. Honestly, what you could do is any kind of drawing. You could put a stencil on the inside and do a drawing on the, tape a stencil on the inside of your glass and do a drawing on the outside. So you can do things with kids that are just, creative and fun. But for purposes of just, I have a bird collision and I want to stop it, you just need a yardstick or a straight edge and make lines 2 inches apart. And I have this in my kitchen. It really is not, it's where I watch birds all the time. And it's, there's a bird feeder probably 25 feet away. But I haven't had any issues since marking my window. So this is a really easy way to do this. And obviously one marker can mark a lot of windows. Oops, sorry about that. This is a friend's window where you can just see she just put up some gift wrapping paper that her kids cut into leaf shapes. This is showing more of the stencil sort of approach. So it doesn't have to be ceramic markers. You can use their tempera paint sticks, or there are different kinds of crayons that are waxy crayons. They are, they are sort of more fun probably to draw with, but less neat looking, so, they're, and I would say this would take a little bit of skill to do. You definitely need a stencil on the inside, or I would in any case. But the other thing is on removing, if you want to remove a ceramic pen marking, you can just, use your fingernail or a credit card or something, a sharp edge, and you can flake it off. And with these tempera paints, you can remove it with vinegar and water. But I would say that they last pretty long. Oh, and by the way, the price estimates here, this is estimating 13 cents for tempera paint. This comes from the Fish and Wildlife Service numbers for national numbers for these different ways to retrofit your windows. So yes, tempera paint is pretty easy. In addition to that, I also, in my front of my house, I have copian blinds because I have windows kind of like this that are, long group of windows. Mine are actually casement windows, but it has worked fine with that. There is some tangling, but it's not terrible. You do have to consider the window that you're trying to remediate. Does it open or do you need to move it? These can get tangled. If it was a casement window, that it was a horizontal casement, you wouldn't be able to use these. You'd need to use the dots or some other choice. But Acopian blinds are basically parachute cord. Fish and Wildlife estimates 11 cents per square foot. You need to hang them. They come actually, if you buy Acopian blinds, there's a website that's birdsaver.com. They have the DIY instructions to make them there, but if you buy them, they come automatically hanging at the appropriate gap here. So you don't have to do too much measuring. What you have to do is measure the length of the window that you need, and then also the width of the window that you need, and then order for that. This is at Northwestern. These are dots, and several companies make these sorts of, it's window film, and it basically is tape where when you receive it, you'll receive a roll of tape that has these dots on it, but it is like paper tape. It's covered. It's not sticky when you first receive it. And you'll also receive measuring tape. So you'll hang your measuring tape across the top and unroll the tape of dots that you've gotten, and then peel off the backing, and that's what makes it stick. So these dots are already pre-measured and just appear this way when you peel off the paper that is packaging the tape. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway, here are some of the companies. Kaleidoscape and Bird Smart Glass are a couple of them. Feather Friendly is one of them. There are other solutions you can use netting or shutters or things like that on the outside of your window. If you're sometimes, what really works great is if you have one of the windows that has insect screens on the outside. Insect screens are visible to birds and do break up the reflections. So if you have insect screens, normally those are not big problem windows. If you're trying to put just netting on the outside to signal to birds, if this is too loose, obviously a bird could hit this and still die, because there'll be too much give to the netting. So the netting has to be pretty tight. There is a company that makes bird safe netting, but then there's a cost to that. So yeah, if you're doing it DIY, the netting has to be far enough from the windows that the birds don't just hit and die anyway.
Mm.
This is at Robert Crown, and they have kind of interesting at Robert Crown. They have they've done sort of an assessment of areas of the building that are more likely to have bird collisions and areas less likely to have bird collisions. So in areas indoors that they consider very reflective and that are near foliage, they have kind of dense dots. But in this sort of random, this is looking from inside outside at their dots. But then in areas where there are fewer risk of bird collisions, they're further apart. So this is one of those areas. You can see that this really isn't looking at a tree. It's too high up. Lower down, they have more dense sort of dotting on the Robert Crown. There are also, so this is the same building. This is their Autistic Solutions. On the outside, this is at Patuxent. It's the U.S. Geological Society's offices in Patuxent, which I think is Maryland. And on the outside looking in, it looks opaque, but on the inside looking out, it's virtually, it looks darker, I guess, if anything. But honestly, they have their lighting very low in this room. I've actually been in this room, and it's very surprising that there isn't, more obstruction to looking out here. But there are in any case, Kaleidoscape makes these sorts of, it didn't make this one. This was custom done for the U.S. Geological Society by one of the staff there. But there are these, oftentimes Kaleidoscape and other companies will make this film that may have the company name, for example, on the outside. You often see that. Beacon School in downtown Evanston had one of these types of films that was opaque on the outside and totally visible on the inside. And I mean, that's a great bird solution. This is out of a zoo. It's just showing several different, well, I guess just a couple of different solutions. So there are the lines here, but in addition, they've done etching at the top. So, you know, just suggesting different solutions for things. In addition to that, I would be terrible, basically, if I didn't mention lighting, because lighting is a big concern for birds as well. And I'll tell you more about that. But it is a concern for migrants that are migrating birds that may be attracted to light. But in addition, even resident birds, their reproduction cycles are can also be skewed by lighting, which mess with their resetting for nighttime clocks. So the basic answer is, as in this picture, you know, here they are using downward facing lighting, but not using all the accent lighting. Use light if, when, and where you need it, and keep it orange, red, and minimized, and brighter isn't safer. I'm going to talk more about all of this. Orange, red in particular, I'm going to settle on for a second, because amber lights work well for birds. Birds do well with any kind of amber or red light, something like that. Fireflies actually blink at the amber shade. So fireflies, the issue with fireflies is that amber lights don't really help fireflies. Fireflies are, the females will actually stop blinking if they're in competition with amber lights. So you actually lose that whole reproductive cycle of those insects. Wow. But the good thing is, of course, fireflies really are only active July and August. I mean, you know, maybe only July. So, I mean, it could be that if we get warm enough weather, everything is so messed up in terms of our warmth in our summers. But, you know, for me, I'll just say, for me, I can keep my lights basically off for fireflies for a few weeks. You know, I mean, and I do have red lights actually on my house in house in Indiana. So where we sometimes do need lights at the walkway and stuff. So although that's, you know, we're a red light district, I'm kind of okay with that. So there's that on fireflies. This is the issue with birds. When there are lights down below, and especially in bad weather, birds will fly down below the clouds and try to get where they can see things. And so lights really do attract birds to windows in urban areas. This is the same house with, you know, with lights on, and actually you can see the Milky Way with the lights off. So solutions, you know, ideally, hopefully, you can turn off your lights by 11 p.m., especially in migration. You use shades and dimmers, you know, motion sensors work. You know, if things are just turning on for, you know, somebody creeping up your alley, or for that, you know, they won't be turned on by insects, timers, you know, anything that you can do to not keep your lights on all the time. Accent lights and roof beams. Also, using your phone as a flashlight is, you know, advised. So brighter isn't safer. And that's what this is about. This is obviously a photo depiction. You know, your results may vary. I will put the disclaimer out there first of all. But this is an unshaded light, and you know that your eyes, I think we've all experienced that our eyes don't adjust very well from a really bright light to darkness. So there is a person in this store that you cannot see until there is a shade upon the light. So it's just to indicate that, you know, people, there was recently an Evanston roundtable article about, you know, well, we don't have enough bright lights. Well, we do need lights, but, you know, consider moderation in our lighting. Some of the issues are that our eyes are slow to adjust, as mentioned here. But, you know, there's also a whole dark sky movement where people are concerned that for our own human health, to reduce obesity, depression, be sure we actually sleep. You know, stress hormones increase without darkness. So you get disorders like breast cancer and sleep disorders. And then there are the animal and even plant impacts from keeping lights on at night. So there's that. And apart from that, there's money and energy. So this is Chicago. This is how our from a satellite, our lighting profile in for Chicago, 5.2 million people. So Berlin is 4.5 million, a tiny bit smaller, but you can see it has a much smaller lighting impact here. And so obviously there's a correspondence in terms of reducing our carbon footprint and our energy costs. In addition, insects. Insects are highly attracted to white lights. And what will happen is overpredation. So the bright lights have been linked to decline of insect populations. That's partly because when there's a big congregation of mayflies and gnats and moths at bright white lights, what happens is there are a lot of spiders there are lots of bats there are birds there. So you would say, okay, great, for spiders, birds, and bats, that is great. But what happens is overpredation, so that the populations are actually in decline as a result of this. So as a result of declining insect populations, there are birds like the chuck willow and the whippoorwill that used to fly around with their mouths open to eat moths, and they would be flying through these lights. And now those birds are in deep population spirals because we do not have the populations of moths, for example, that we used to have. So that's the impact of bright lights on insects. And then whatever you do, after you do it, do monitor to see if it worked, because it may be that, you need to adjust whatever you've done. Maybe, there still is some reflection, or we've overlooked some aspect of, protecting some area where maybe plants are reflected inside, or sometimes you don't realize that plants are reflecting inside until you really start to pay attention to what the problem is. So this is monitoring going on at Northwestern. This is Allison Sloan. This is a historically terrible window that's also really hard to access. This is on the back end of Kellogg near their loading dock. And, there would just be 20 birds. This was actually a day when I think she was finding 26 dead birds here. And this is what happens. So this is another friend of ours, Catherine Gillespie, who's another bird monitor. And these are the live birds that are going to go to Willowbrook in her car, and by way of Peggy Notebart. And these are all the dead birds that are collected and will go to the Field Museum. So if you do find an injured bird, you can put it, normally what we do is we put a paper towel in the bottom of a paper bag and fold the top of put the bird in, and fold the paper towel is so that the bird can hang on to something, because otherwise it's very slippy inside of and stressful inside of a paper bag. But inside of a paper bag, roll the top and clip the top of the bag. And then we have a piece of paper or something to mark where we exactly found the bird, when, and who found it. So that we can kind of track where these birds are hitting. And we do say locations and who found the bird on the dead ones as well. And so we can actually go to the Field Museum and it can say, pull all the birds that Leslie Shad has found. And they'll show me all the birds that I found in the course of the time I've been monitoring at Northwestern. The Field Museum is pretty amazing. So yes, so if you're monitoring, check for bird collision, take photos if you can of where you found it, because later on you may be trying to figure out whether it's sometimes very difficult to find out whether birds are hitting a low window, or maybe they're hitting the third story, or up near the attic someplace. So taking a photo of where they've hit later on, you might be able to figure out what the problem was. For example, you might fix the ground floor windows, and then it'll turn out that it was actually something up on the third floor that you hadn't even thought was a window up there. I try to identify where they hit. Injured birds, this is the hotline for the Chicago Bird Collision Monitors. And then you can also email us or call us or whatever to get help. I mentioned I'm not going to spend much time on new construction because I'm assuming that most of us are not architects. But there is a new bird-friendly building ordinance. What it does is look at primarily the first zone 1, which is the first 3 floors, and then above a green roof. As I mentioned, that's kind of like almost treated as a sidewalk. So the area above that as well gets special attention. And then the rest of the building is also considered. But there's not only the Evanston ordinance, but also the lead bird friendly ordinance. Most of these ordinances do is to assign a threat factor. So you can imagine, I'm going to mention for a second spend a second on this. You can imagine that concrete basically is zero threat to bird collision. I mean, a bird can hit concrete, but it's, probably an ailing bird to begin with. It's really reflective glass that is the highly dangerous, highest threat factor to birds. So each of these different, materials that you would use for building construction, sorry about that. Each of these different materials is assigned a threat factor, and their manufacturer can tell you what that is. So there may be a threat factor of 30 or 40 for reflective glass, and basically for 0 for concrete. So you do a calculation of what the threat factor is for this zone 1 and zone 2. And I think for zone 1 in Evanston, you can't have a threat higher than 15 is how that basically works. There also are certain features that are highly dangerous to birds, and that can be walkways like this. That kind of looks like a walkway as well. See-through corners, bus stops. This is another bus stop. Awnings that are sticking out like that, or some kind of wind protection. Also, glass balconies and glass wind protection. Those are all extra dangerous to birds, and so they also have a low threat factor. So they should be no more, I think, than 15 in terms of the calculation of the danger to birds. Evanston also requires a lights out feature for that. The new buildings consider that when they're in construction. So there's that. This is lead pilot credit, and it basically does the same thing. It has the building divided into zones, and then that more heavily weights the green area where the greater likelihood of collision is, as opposed to the rest of the building. And this is an example of a lead bird-friendly building. I'm going to just show you a few more of these just because they're interesting. These are all different examples of bird-friendly building design. So you can add frit to the windows, you can add a UV pattern to the windows, translucent stained or etched windows, all of those reduce bird collision. Awnings can also help, but they have to reduce the reflection. So you kind of, that requires a lot of attention and sometimes doesn't work. Angled glass can work, but this, sometimes in angled glass, you can still see quite a lot of reflection. So it still needs, may still need treatment. This is another example of an awning. So those are not as surefire. And then there are grills and shades that are bird friendly. And these are some examples of those, also sometimes in, not in New York City, this is New York City, of course, but in some areas you can have greenery growing up the facade of a building. And that can be helpful, although birds can roost in that greenery. So you don't want to have too much distance between the building and the trellis or the outside, the greenery part, so that you don't want to have birds be able to get up enough speed to actually die against the building. So this is the same sort of thing that, birds can roost in here, but this is close enough to the building that they really can't get up enough speed to damage themselves, if that makes sense. Yeah, often this is done also for energy and heat reasons, So this can also be a cooling effect for the building, and some of them are motorized to, apply the shades when it's daytime and take them off at night. These are more examples. This is Jeannie Gang's, fantastic. Also the visual noise can reduce the likelihood of hitting. The birds will recognize, well, this is something crazy. So there may be a little bit more of less of birds just flying right into it, because there's some avoidance of that. These are some more of the virtual noise. Even the colors can provide some virtual noise. Although I think this is possibly, I guess that's not a see-through window. It looks like there's almost a see-through window right there. Yeah, this is more visual noise. Here you really don't see windows. more of that. Again, this is an awning, but awnings don't always work. This could be reflective, but you can see that they do have lines as well on that. And this is, almost an opaque window. So these are ways to get involved. I'll post this PowerPoint so you can see it, but these are some sources and where to find different things as well. Paint stores can have ceramic markers. And that's the end of that story. And so I'm happy to answer questions or talk with you all.
Hey, Leslie, it's Beth Drucker. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for doing this.
Good.
Joining
Hey,
in.
well, sorry to butt in. I just wanted to remind people that we host bird walks, 8 o'clock Sundays in May. Everyone's welcome. If any of your folks want to help be a guide at those, we're always looking for more guides. And thirdly, wanted to know whether or not I could link to this presentation from our newsletter.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I'd love you to do that. Yes. It'll be posted on we have a new natural habitat website, so I can post it there myself. So that is so great. So yes, I'll give you the link to that.
Okay, and it just reminded me that Wilmette's got to do a bird-friendly ordinance too. We'll follow your lead on that.
Oh, cool. Well, ours was following Chicago. So Chicago has developed a bird-friendly ordinance, but they are still figuring out how to implement it, to be honest. So they're not all the way there.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Great. Do Artscape decals work? They're put on the inside of windows. Inside usually will not work. They really have to, sorry, Paula Twilling wrote to me about this. Decals on the inside of windows, there can still be full reflection on the outside. So decals often don't work at all. And they have to be closer than, usually manufacturer instructions just say, buy 3 of them and put them up. Well, that may not work. But you know what? I have found that anything helps. If there is an area where, birds hit, and you don't have anything else, you can put up a decal. So I would say do what you have and then monitor and see if it fixed the problem or not. Karen, you want to ask me something?
Yes, thank you. This is, I think, the best opportunity I've ever had to do this, which is, again, this is a last resort. If you do find a bird or you hear a bird hit your window, much better to preventive work. I understand that. But years ago, my dear godmother told me, best thing you can do is take an old towel outside, pick the bird up, and gently hold it, not right near you, but close enough that it's warmed, because it'll probably be in shock. I've had a lot of good luck. And then after a little while, maybe they'll flutter a little bit. And I put the towel down. After a few minutes, I take the towel away from the bird, and then often they fly away. So I don't know if that's an accepted method of if you find a bird that's still living after a strike, or if that shouldn't be done.
Sorry about that. I think it sounds like you're very concerned and caring about the birds. And so I would hate to tell somebody not to do something that is, paying attention to this bird. The reason to try to send the bird in to Willowbrook is because they get brain swelling. And so they can, even if they look okay, they may die within 12 hours. I think it's like half of them die within 12 hours. So, and the way to do that is to call, obviously we're not saying that you drive down to Willowbrook when you have a bird hit, but what you can do is to call the bird collision monitors, put it in a paper bag, as I mentioned, put a paper towel in there, put it in a paper bag, roll the top up, call the bird collision monitors hotline, and they will come and pick it up and get it to Willowbrook. So it'll be like a relay to Willowbrook, but that's really the best thing to do. But I have heard, I know people who also just put an injured bird under a shrub or something like that and try to let it recover itself. The danger with that is that the bird is totally vulnerable while it's, sitting under a shrub. Another bird can get it. As I mentioned, seagulls and crows are just seagulls. I shouldn't blame crows as much, but they are known to do this as well, to just run in and grab a bird and kill it and eat it, as well as other mammals will do that. I've even had a chipmunk do that. A chipmunk grabbed a bird and pulled a fledgling away, well, okay, poor little chipmunk. I'm happy for the chipmunk, but ugh. So yeah, so ideally really, call bird collision monitors, even if it is just to get their advice about it, but they will want to pick it up. Otherwise, make your own decision about that.
No, that's good advice. Thank you. I appreciate. What I'll do is I'll probably still do what I do, but as soon as I know the bird's hit, I'll call the collision monitors and hopefully they'll come in time to pick it up before I'll try to keep it in a bag. After I put it in a towel, I'll put it probably in the bag and then go from there and call them
Yeah.
and hopefully give them enough time to get here. So thank you.
I mean, and you can bring the bag inside. You don't have to leave the bag, as I mentioned, the birds are pretty vulnerable when they're just sitting there. So yeah, bring the bag inside or someplace safe, maybe.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I had a question. I don't know how to get the hand to
Go
go in
ahead.
front of
Yeah,
me.
no, totally good. I
I
was
could only
gonna.
find the one finger, but anyway, I have a
No, it's
number
all
of
good.
questions. Well, number one, I want to say how much I enjoyed your presentation. You do an excellent job and a lot of information. And I guess one of the first things is, are your presentations available to schools? I was just thinking, gosh, this is
Oh, I
something
would
that
love to do that. I would
kids should
love to do
know
that.
about this.
Yes, I would love to do that. And I have talked with some schools about it. And I mean, the kids want to solve this problem, right? The kids know, I mean, and also if people are in apartment buildings or school buildings or anything like that, the custodial staff knows where birds are hitting. They're probably sweeping them up in the mornings. So it would be, good to, even talk to the custodial staff about that, because there may be a certain window that's the problem, maybe something easily fixed. So I would love to talk to schools. So
yeah, I don't know how you go to, I don't have children and I'm not familiar with the schools. I don't know if the PTAs should be involved or I don't know how to go about doing it because I have no contact or involvement with the school system, but
yeah, I mean, actually I do. Well, Bea and I are both connected to the District 65 in Evanston school districts. So I can definitely reach, and I have been doing some of that. So yes,
great.
but I'm fairly only really connected in Evanston, I gotta say. So yeah.
Okay, well, you had also mentioned that Evanston has a bird-friendly ordinance, and I was so disappointed to see the building. I'm from Wilmette, and seeing the new building going up on the corner of Green Bay Road, and I think it's Washington. It's very close to where the village hall is, but on the west side of the railroad tracks. And it's about 4 stories tall, and it has all glass windows, floor to ceiling on all floors. But they're green glass and the corners are all transparent. And it's like a real shame that Wilmette couldn't get an ordinance, a bird-friendly ordinance before that building was built.
Yeah.
Is there any community besides Evanston that has such an ordinance? How
Not
can
well.
we gang up on Wilmette?
Yeah. Well, Toronto has a fantastic one. Los Angeles has a bird friendly. New York City has a really good bird friendly ordinance. So there are big cities that do, but it's not that common for cities our size. There are not a ton of them. I think Madison has one, Wisconsin. But actually I can also, there is I can share a link, or I don't know how I do that, but maybe I can share a link to all the other ordinances, or you can write to me at habitat@naturalhabitatevanston.org, habitat@naturalhabitatevanston.org. And I can send you information on all the other, there's a page that keeps up to date on all the ordinances. It's on the American Bird Conservancy website, which is ABC Birds. It's a really good website, abcbirds.org.
Okay, I will look into that. There's a 2.5-story old Victorian building, a family home that has mirrored glass on the south side of the building. I often thought, I talked to the former owner who was sold recently, and I asked her if, trying to be, friendly, because I was riding my bike and I stopped and I asked her if she finds many dead birds on her porch, which is, like a raised porch underneath this. And she's, oh yeah, we always get several, didn't seem particularly concerned about that. And she didn't seem to have any positive feelings, particularly about birds. And I didn't want to get into any kind of argument or conflict with her because she seemed in a hurry. But I was wondering, is there some material that can be left? I know you can't put stuff in mailboxes unless it's US mail. How do you approach? I mean, it's really, especially during migration time, I look up there at that building, that home, and it's like you cannot tell the difference between the sky and the trees.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
I would walk into it.
Right. I mean, honestly, I think that there has to be some connection to, we did recently do an event at the Chase building on Orrington and Evanston. But we got permission from the managers and, had bagels and things and gave information to all the tenants. But I think that stuff just gets trashed. If you just leave things outside or you leave things on, it's hardly worth it, I think, unless you have, unless you can, leave a note or post it or something and say, would you be willing to call me about the bird issue, about bird friendly, and then, there are materials, there are plenty of materials, but honestly, I hardly think it's worth it unless there's some contact there.
How about Go Green Wilmette? Does your organization participate in, and they haven't had a big conference in a couple of years because of COVID, but I think it'll be coming back.
Well, Beth is on here. It looks like she's still, she just unmuted herself.
I can unmute. Hey, thanks for your concern about the building in Wilmette. There were lots of public hearings, and that building was required to address bird collision issues. And I drove by it myself, and I thought, okay, now what actually did they do? So we'll look into that.
Oh, great.
So
late now, though, I think.
Well, yeah. But that was a big issue, and it was the first building that was required to be like bird friendly certified in the suburbs. So
That's great.
So but it's a good point. I should just check in, make sure it actually happened.
If that's the result of all these ordinance, the ordinance or the committee that approved it, it's like, oh my God, something is still grossly wrong.
Yeah, so we'll look into that. So the bird friendly issue is there's so much more we could all be doing, no doubt about it.
Yes.
It always takes people like Leslie Shad, who just says, wow, this is going to be one of the things that I really focus on. Right now, we don't have a Go Green person really focused on it. And I hope maybe we can do more in the future. But that's why I wanted, when I said, can I link to this? This is for the Go Green Wilmette newsletter. I just had a post. We just put a post in about bird friendly issues, and we did a social media post about this issue as well.
Great. And how would you, any good response to a comment when somebody says, oh yeah, that bird committed suicide? I was dumbstruck.
Yeah.
I had no, but I would like to be able to say something intelligent and non-confrontational when I hear something like that.
Right. Well, the main thing is it's so easy to avoid that. For the most part, there are fixes to that, probably even for if it's a tall building that happened near, even just turning out the lights at night, the answer is, it's just, it's
not the bird's fault is the answer, it's not.
Well, that is, but then that's a little
confrontational intervention.
Yeah, the reality is it's so easy to for humans to help avoid that. That's the answer, really. It's so easy to avoid it. I would say that, getting buildings to the point that Beth was making about trying to check with that building, it is often very difficult to get buildings to talk with you afterwards about what they've actually done to be bird friendly. We have a bunch of buildings in Evanston that are supposed to be bird friendly. So without the ordinance, there was, people just wouldn't talk with us about it. If they didn't want to, they wouldn't talk about it, I should say. But with the ordinance, they actually have to establish that they're bird friendly to get the building permit. So that's way better.
Positive, yes.
Yeah, that's way better. But, it's not an easy issue, and people just don't want to bother with it, so.
Years ago, I was a member of the Chicago Architectural Society, I think, I don't remember the exact name of it, but we would tour buildings downtown as they were being built. And one of the things that was brought up was that the glass manufacturers, I think, can put in like a checkerboard pattern or whatever inside the glass as it's being made. Is that being done, or does that help?
Yes. Oh, well, yes, it definitely does help. Having the glass have frit included, which is basically just a little grit that's inside, or have it be etched or whatever. There are lots of solutions. And because New York City passed a bird-friendly ordinance, the prices are coming down per square foot on commercial buildings. So there definitely are solutions, and there's a database on ABC Birds that Bea shared that website. They have a database that rates different bird-friendly glass and solutions as well, the dots and the things that I mentioned that are applied after the fact, as well as the treated glass that you're mentioning, are all sort of rated on there. But actually now there are more and more products. So really you need the manufacturer to tell you what the threat rating is, you know. So yeah, so that's good news. Yeah.
Great. Last thing
Yeah,
is
or
just
the less
basically
glass.
a comment. It was that I was anxious for the warmer weather to come so that I could wash my many sliding glass doors. And I've decided, who needs really sparkling clean windows anyway? So, I mean, I love to see through a clean window, but this information is making me think twice about how absolutely
Right.
spotless the windows.
Right.
'Cause I
That's
do
the
get
other
very
way to do this, is just have dirty windows. Right.
Yeah. Thank
yeah.
you so much for your help
Sure.
and your comments.
Sure. Thank you. Well, if everyone is done, I so appreciate your time and your interest in this, and I hope you'll email me if you have a problem window. I'm happy to try to find solutions, and also thrilled to work with Go Green Will Met or anyone else on these issues.
Thank you. And I will be sending all the information along to everybody who signed up. And again, if you have any questions that you want to send me, and I can relay them to Leslie if you forget her email, or just send them directly to her. Thank you.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. As always, super interesting. Thank you, everybody.